Ooh, welcome one, welcome all into Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora. He is my co-host, Brandon Lisklu, always alongside for the ride. Lions win a big one this week, folks. Thanksgiving, it already feels like quite a while ago, actually, but Detroit turned in a 34-17 performance, moved to 8-4 on the season after those two losses that we remember to Arizona and New England. Maybe a deep breath game, maybe a game that you were expecting the Lions to win, maybe a little bit more impressive fashion than some thought. We're going to break it all down. We're going to look at this Bears game as much as we can. Then we're going to look forward to a big game against Tampa Bay, which sounds funny, but it is because Green Bay refuses to lose. We'll get into that as well. They took care of business against New England at home. So the NFC North Division still a good tight race. Detroit needs every win along the way. So before we get to this Bears game, I first turn it over to my co-host, Brandon Elisabeth.
Yeah, and I want to go ahead and apologize to everybody right now if my voice starts sounding funny or if I just start coughing midstream. Been a little sick this week, but we're going to power through as always. And from apologies to thankfulness, we want to thank you guys for continuing to listen, continue to interact with us on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff, and continue to share it with a friend or a family member who enjoys the Lions. And, well, let's face it, not every job is great. We got to kill that time somehow. So we really appreciate you guys helping us out and helping us grow the show. And we're going to launch a site here pretty soon to go with the show. We'll have blogs on there. We'll obviously have our show. We'll have all kinds of good stuff for Detroit Lions fans. So we'll keep you updated on that on social media and through the show. One thing I'm going to go ahead and update right now is my biggest takeaway from this game. Seamless transition. That was beautiful. And that's, I think we can stop at the Matthew Stafford, isn't it? Might or might not be a franchise quarterback talk. He kind of did okay. I mean, you give him some time and you see what happens. He completely diced the Bears' defense up. And we should also throw out there that, yes, the Bears are pretty atrocious and look like they've probably given up on their coach. But 34-45, 390 yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 sack, and one of them was he slid just to keep the clock running. He could have easily thrown it away. Gives him a quarterback rating of 116. Nick, tell me you weren't impressed.
No, I'm going to agree and disagree with you. I was very impressed with Matthew Stafford, and I'm on the same side of the fence as you in that Stafford is a franchise quarterback. But for people that are on the other side of the fence, I'm not sure this is the game that converts them against probably the worst pass defense in the league, a home game on Thanksgiving where you're expected to show up. And Stafford did in a big way. I loved his performance. I do believe he's a franchise quarterback, but the detractors are still going to point to the fact that he doesn't win games against good opponents on the road, and until he does that, I think this argument's still there for what it is. But this was huge for the offense. I loved what I saw out of him. Again, temper it because that Bears passing defense is so bad. But you see what Stafford does when he has time to throw, and if the offensive line gets better, he'll have more time to throw, not just against bad defenses. But when he has time to dice up an opponent, this is what happens. And Calvin Johnson came to play as well.
Well, yeah, I guess the death report for Calvin Johnson was just a touch premature. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I really loved that I saw from Stafford, and this one, when I watched the tape, I really tried to focus on this, is his eyes. Because I thought about that earlier in the week, how one of the things that makes Drew Brees so good is that he would be looking off the safety. And, it's a very similar offense. Or Aaron Rodgers does it all the time, too. He looks somebody off, and then he throws it to the other guy deep. And it's always a beautiful ball because, well, Aaron Rodgers. I don't even want to talk about that right now. But we saw that from Stafford this week. He did it on the very first play. He locked in air quotes, on Pettigrew and then flicked it to Megatron. He had that thing rolling, and it's really beautiful when he does it, when he works his progressions and actually makes the defense guess where he's going to go with the ball.
Yeah, this was in my bold prediction. I think I had Stafford throwing 3 touchdowns in this game. He only went with 2, but this is exactly what this offense can be when it's firing. And also note that the running game actually made a rare appearance in this game as well as Joique Bell got going. He had 2 touchdowns on the ground, 91 yards on 23 carries, and I think that number is the most significant, is the 23 carries. The offense stayed committed to the run throughout this game while also having the balance with the passing game and firing on all cylinders. It's incredible what a balanced offense looks like. This team hasn't seen it in so long. We've got 23 carries from Bell. You've got Calvin with 11 catches for 146. Golden Tate was heavily involved. Other players were involved. This is what the Lions offense should be. And after 2 terrible weeks offensively against Arizona and New England, it's really refreshing. Temper it because it was the Bears at home on Thanksgiving. But I see bright signs moving forward, and I think it's going to really show again next week in Tampa Bay.
Wow, I love this optimism from you. You don't usually hear that from negative Nick. But one thing I'm going to go ahead and say is that I'm not totally on board with the insistence on balance. I understand it in some ways, but look what the Patriots did. They absolutely destroyed Detroit's defense by continuously throwing the ball. They had 53 attempts that game. Yes, they ran it late and they ended up piling on yards. And to be fair, I think it was 48 of Joik Bell's yards came on the last drive of the game. So it's
Sure.
not like they were really running the ball well. I think they might have been averaging 2 yards a carry up into that point, and then Joey
Wow.
Bell rips off the 25-yarder, and things start to change. But when you're slinging it around, you're getting the ball out quickly, you're making that offensive line much like opposing teams try to do with Detroit's defensive line. You are negating the fact that your offensive line is playing without two starters by getting the ball out quickly. Plus, it gets Stafford into a rhythm. I'm all for abandoning the run. I think they should do it more often.
Well, in most situations with this team, it's going to call more for a pass-heavy offense, but you're still going to have those games where you need the balance or you need a running game. You're not always going to be facing the 30th ranked passing defense in the league. Sometimes you're going to be in the playoffs against the Seattle Seahawks, and you're going to need to be able to establish some kind of balance. And that's just an example. But to know that the Lions' running game on occasion can show up for whatever it's worth, 23 for 91 yards isn't the greatest thing in the world. But to know that it is there, I mean, it's encouraging to at least see them stick with it throughout an entire football game.
Yeah, well, no. Yeah, that's
No.
that's my official analysis. I understand your point. It is nice to have the run, but they're not going to be able to run the ball when they're trying to be balanced. Chicago sucks, so I guess that is all what it is, and you made that point. But I really want to see them come out, and it's not going to happen this week because I don't really think they need to come out that way. But I want to see a game plan that attacks the defense through the air. I would have loved to see that against Arizona, and once I started seeing it here, I was like, oh, you will do that. You can make those play calls. Do that more often. Look at the first drive. It was run, run, and then, yeah, it was a crappy throw, and which Megatron wasn't even open. But it just, I don't know, it doesn't really work. One thing we do want to get into, because we do have a guest coming on in about 15, 16 minutes, with the short passes, it made the job for the offensive line a little easier. But I got to say, overall, they seem to play pretty well, even with Cornelius Lucas on the left side. Did anything stand out to you there, Nick, or are you just happy to see that they weren't a sieve?
I mean, I'm not sure anything stands out to me. There isn't a lot going on with the Chicago Bears. Jared Allen can still get to you there, but their defense, there's a lot left to be desired with Chicago. Not just their passing defense, but even with their running defense. I mean, I don't know that I learned much about the offensive line. I thought they played well in this game, like you said. And Lucas, it's more hiding him than showcasing him. That's to be certain. I'd like to see him do it against a better defensive opponent before I go and tout the offensive line as starting to even figure it out. Like you said, those 23 carries for Joik Bell, for the most of the game, it was only 2 yards per, and so that final drive. So the hog mollies up front weren't really pushing the line of scrimmage, but Stafford had enough time to throw. Most of it was those short passes, which is a credit to the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, which we touched on last week, was getting the ball out of his hand, quick screens, what have you, just short routes, forcing the ball out of his hands before the offensive line really has time to mess up, which is something they've been doing early and often in games this season. I don't want to give them too much credit yet, Brandon, but turn in one or two more performances like they did against Chicago, and then we can talk that way.
Well, and I don't know. They've talked about Reef might have played if they had played on Sunday.
Sure.
There's talk of Warford kind of getting back on track. Maybe he'll be available this week. We'll dive into all that type of stuff a little bit later on. But there is a couple things that jumped out to me. One, Port Pettigrew was the guy that really effectively had to take on Jared Allen most of the day, and that's just not fair for anybody on Detroit's side. So that's to be expected that he was going to struggle there. Lucas wasn't really entrusted with him, and yes, of course, there was the Sims just getting completely schooled for the strip sack that set up the
Yeah.
second touchdown. But one thing that I noticed, and it was really on the first couple plays, the stretch plays don't work because they don't have the individual pieces that are working well enough. On the first play, there was a hole where Pettigrew was pushing Allen out, and Lucas actually went for the linebacker in the second level. But just as Bell is about to go for it, he has to cut back because Sims can't hold his block, and he gets cleaned up by a backside linebacker that was never intended to be there. So thus that guy wasn't blocked. You can't account for everybody. And if Sims had gotten a little bit of push, it would have worked. The problem with that type of play is that you need at least adequate guys at each spot. Unfortunately, they don't have that, especially Dominic Raiola. He lacks lateral power. I'm kind of making this up. But what I mean is that going to the side, he can't get any pop. Heck, the guy is 2 yards in the backfield every time Stafford drops back. So I can't see how he's going to take a step to his left and then all of a sudden deliver the defensive tackle a few yards off the ball. That's just not going to happen with this team. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to fix that moving forward. I think that's why they were running so many of those inside runs that people were complaining about. But maybe Reggie Bush is quick enough to get through these holes that are closing. I'm just going to go ahead and doubt it because, well, do you even believe he'll play no matter what he says this week?
Are we getting into the Reggie Bush stuff? You want to do it?
I mean, well, there is the matter of, you have that foolish bet that he's going to end up with more points than Joique Bell. I can't see how that even. You don't even have the numbers on the rundown anymore.
No, I abandoned them this week, as we'll get to. Okay, so I actually have Reggie Bush as my most disappointing Lion, which he didn't even play, but I'll get to that in a minute. Let me touch on just a couple more things from this game, actually. And one of them, as you were talking about the offensive line and its lack of push or what have you, or lateral, whatever word you just used.
Lateral power.
Lateral power. On the goal line, Cocky Caldwell came back out this week, and Detroit actually went for it on the goal line and did score. Joique Bell with 1 yard touchdown run. Were you surprised to see Cocky Caldwell come back out and have the Lions push for that when we mentioned how the offensive line isn't getting much of a push at all and actually push the ball in the end zone up the gut with Joique Bell, or was that what you expected out of this team?
Well, I kind of wonder if he doesn't have middle child syndrome.
Yeah.
I mean, when he's playing Big Brother, when he's playing the good teams, the good coaches, the Bruce Arians, the Bill Belichicks, I wonder if he doesn't get a little bit intimidated. Like, why not take that same chance last week? Especially because New England is going to score points. You don't know Chicago is going to do that. Jay Cutler's just as likely to throw a pick or to throw it into the crowd as he is to Brandon Marshall, and that dude can catch anything. So I wasn't completely surprised because it felt like a situation where nobody was going to kill him for it. Like, right. Yeah, of course you go on the goal line against Chicago. They suck. Why wouldn't you? So even if they didn't get it, they would have looked at the players and been like, what is wrong with you? So I wasn't shocked at all.
I'd like to take it as Caldwell learning from a mistake last week, but I lean more towards what you said was this is just a different situation against a bad opponent where you think the risk is worth it, whereas I think last week is when the risk was really necessary against a New England team that's going to score points. I wish it was more of him learning from his mistakes. We'll see if this situation arises again, what he does. I would, against better teams, lean to him being conservative once more. The defense, Brandon, we haven't talked much about it yet, but it got its stuff together pretty quickly in this game after some early Chicago points. That's becoming a theme with Terrell Austin's defense throughout the years. They'll give up early points, and then they make their adjustments and just completely shut the other team down. It happened again in this game, and there was a lot of positives that came out of the defensive effort.
Well, I'm a little concerned about the fact that this is happening every game. Why? Yeah. You have to imagine that any intelligent team, and granted, Mark Trestman might not know a lot about defense, but the dude is very intelligent when it comes to offense, is going to take that New England attack and say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do to this defense. Why weren't they ready for that from the jump? And to be honest, it's the reason that they started getting the stops was because they started getting pressure from up front, especially Ziggy. Especially from Ziggy. I'll get into that in a few minutes. But there were drops. Martellus Bennett was dropped. I warned you about Martellus Bennett before that game. He was tough. He's incredibly difficult to guard, especially for those linebackers. I thought they struggled again as well. Although the 2 or 3 times I saw them going man, Josh Bynes had great coverage on Bennett. Lively had great coverage on Matt Forte, who I hope. Well, I didn't have Matt Forte because my fantasy team sucks, and I hope you didn't either, Nick, because he didn't do a darn thing.
I do have him. He's been great all year, but for some reason Chicago decided they were only going to give him the ball 7 times, and I realized the blueprint New England laid it out last week. But to only give the ball to a playmaker like Matt Forte 7 times is a little bit different than not relying on LeGarrette Blount to get the job done. And Forte's a pass catcher that was just non-existent in this game. I didn't understand Chicago's game plan much at all after those. I mean, those initial series surprised Detroit, and then they just were all over the place the rest of the game. Defensive playmakers, let me just run down a couple of them. Pass deflections. Did you see how many Lions actually deflected passes in this game?
Oh, great. Good way to put me on the spot. No, I didn't see.
Okay, it's a big number. Levy had one. Slay had three. Glover Quinn had one. Rasheed Mathis had one. Uh, James Iadebo had one. George Johnson had one. Cassius Vaughn had one. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting anyone, but there was a ton of pass deflections for Detroit. They got pressure, and that was the result of it. When you force Cutler into bad situations, he's going to make bad throws. He had quite a few of them in this game, and it resulted in deflections for the Lions' defense and getting Chicago off the field. It's terrible to see those early points so consistently that they have to make adjustments, and then they're so good. I don't know why they can't open a game as well as they seem to finish it defensively, but I love the adjustments that Terrell Austin makes. I'm having a tough time critiquing him or criticizing because when he does make the adjustments in game, they're so phenomenal.
Well, and let me take this time to thank you for not bringing up Eric Ebron. I thought for sure that was going to come up.
I don't have anything to say about Eric Ebron at this point. He is what he is. I learned nothing new about Eric Ebron other than he can jump real high.
Hey, and that's an impressive skill.
Yeah, it sure is. It's number 10 overall type skill. That's what that is.
Yeah, I just had to bring it up a little bit.
But hey, if you anytime you want to bring it up, I'll bring it down. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, the coverage downfield was exceptional. Darius Slay he had a great game. I'm actually going to get into him. You know what? This is the time I want to go ahead. Let's just move over to our MVPs because, like we said, we got a guest coming on here in a little bit, and actually just about 7 minutes or so. My MVP for this game, there were so many ways we could have gone. We talked about Stafford, the beautiful touch passes and everything like that. But for me, it's Ezekiel Ziggy Ansah.
Shot.
He had himself a ball game. He had 10 pressures, 10 quarterback hurries. Not pressures because you're supposed to combine everything. I think he would have ended up with 12 pressures because he had a sack and another quarterback hit. The dude was insane. Plus, he was forcing holding penalties. Yeah. It seemed like if he didn't get near Cutler, that somebody was holding him, whether they were calling or not. I felt like there were a lot of holding calls that kind of got away from the refs a bit this game. But overall, yeah, what a game. Oh, it looks like Pro Football Focus took away one of the hurries, but they did give him 2 quarterback hits. So we won't demote him for the MVP. What a game. Ziggy, take another shot.
Yeah, go ahead and take as many as you want because Ziggy was great in this game from start to finish. It wasn't just a couple select plays; it was a complete effort, which is something you don't always get out of Ezekiel Ansah. Sometimes it's a great play here or there, and then some plays where he can kind of disappear at times. But I thought he played a start to finish phenomenal game. There weren't many holes in Ezekiel Ansah's performance. Game MVP. Let me go with someone. I don't know if we might have went with him week 1 against the Giants. I know we haven't gone with him since. That's Calvin Johnson. Great to see him back on the stat sheet in a big way. I know, and his numbers were phenomenal. Numbers you'd expect out of a guy like Calvin Johnson. 11 catches for 146 and 2 TDs. Stafford was all over him in this game, but he spread the ball out a ton because they passed it so much, and there was a ton of weapons to get to. But this was the good Calvin Johnson. Tate also had 8 for 89, so really just between those two, a great performance. But this is obviously Calvin's day. You will hope to see this moving forward. This is healthy Calvin Johnson. This is him creating separation in the secondary, just beating people at the line of scrimmage and not letting them press him in any way. There was just nothing Chicago could do defensively against Calvin Johnson, and that's going to happen to a lot of teams when he is healthy and playing at his best, which he was here. We've seen it plenty of times before out of Calvin Johnson, just not a ton this season. So give the man his due. He showed up on Thanksgiving. Let's hope he can do it against Tampa Bay and against some good teams down the stretch in games that Detroit really needs to win.
Yeah, he's still pretty good apparently.
What I hear.
Yeah, but hey, let's see it for a while now. Let's keep him healthy. Let's keep him out there. Another thing, he didn't take any big hits. He didn't really get hung out to dry there. That first touchdown. Maybe if a defender takes a different route, he could have gotten cut in half. But we're not going to worry too much about that. Obviously, one more thing about Stafford, real quick: 9 different receivers had a catch in this game.
Yeah,
that's Brandon Pettigrew had a catch. I don't think he's had a catch since 2009. So that was huge to see. What didn't come up quite so huge. I thought about taking Ahedebo.
James Iadebo.
Diggs. I thought about kind of bringing up Diggs, but he's just played so well this year. It's really hard to get after him. He did have a couple missed tackles, like when he went high on Alshon Jeffrey at about the 5-yard line on that first touchdown. Come on, man. You have to get lower on him than that. But for me, it's Jeremy Ross. And I do not know what's happened to him when it comes to the return game. 6 yards deep on the opening kickoff, and he runs it out. Gets to 13. This has been a theme. He wants to run it out. I think he's pressing. He doesn't look like the same guy that's making his cut and then exploding upfield. It's almost like he's thinking too much. Like, I got to make a play. I got to make a play. This is what I do. And he's just not doing it. Plus, he fumbled away, I think, and granted, Detroit recovered it. But I want to say the first punt or second punt, regardless, very early. He just doesn't look comfortable back there right now.
No, he doesn't. I think last week was the first week we actually mentioned Jeremy Ross because we were realizing he just wasn't the guy we saw last season when he was a phenomenal return man, and then this year it's been such an insignificant part of Detroit's game. The special teams have great punting from Sam Martin. We focused a ton on the kicking game, but the return game just hasn't been there, and it wasn't again this week. He's been disappointing all season. I think we just noticed it more in this game because we're finally coming around to it. I don't see it changing. It seems maybe he's lost a step. I don't know. I think he's made some nice plays as a receiver this year and completely lost his touch as a return man. I don't know where the balance is with that. I don't know the answer to this question, but Jeremy Ross has been disappointing in that aspect of his game all season. So has Reggie freaking Bush. Expected to play. I didn't even know he was a game time decision before they said he's not going to play. It was just he didn't play the week before. He probably could have if needed. So he's going to play on Thanksgiving. No, he's not going to play on Thanksgiving. There's no Reggie Bush to speak of. And then I don't even want to speculate on his status for this week against Tampa Bay because I guess Reggie Bush is an enigma at this point who's going to play when he feels ready to. I don't know what the problem is. It's disappointing that he's not on the field. He didn't make a difference when he was on the field this season anyway, but you're paying the man a lot of money to be on the field, and he seems healthy enough to play. I don't know what the issue is here. On the opposite side of the spectrum, the guy that is really filling in his role is Theo Riddick, who was my unsung hero. 6 catches in this one, doing the things that Reggie Bush is supposed to be doing for this offense. I suppose be grateful that there is someone filling that role with the same skill set as a Reggie Bush. Theo Riddick can do what Reggie Bush can do at this point anyway. It's just disappointing that Reggie Bush isn't even getting on the field at all.
Yeah, it's almost we joke about forgetting who Calvin Johnson is, but at this point, I don't. I told you before this season I thought he was overrated. I didn't really remember a lot of him being significant. What did he do this year again? Oh, he did have that opening, that season opening touchdown. That was nice.
Don't forget about that huge run in the preseason for a touchdown too. Beautiful run.
Oh yeah. Those count. But real quick, because we have our guest here, I want to say that for me, the unsung hero of this game was Darius Slay. That man can tackle. And not only is he doing great as far as staying in the hip pocket, going down the field, challenging at the high point of the ball, not letting receivers get it into their body. He is tackling so well. There was back-to-back plays at the beginning of the second half. He stoned Brandon Marshall on a quick screen at the line of scrimmage, and he wrapped up number 23, who I'm blanking on right now, but wrapped him up real quickly after a catch, just wouldn't let them pick up any yards after the catch, and that was huge because I think there were, in the first half, there was something like 9 Bears passes that either didn't go to the line of scrimmage or just a couple yards past. There really wasn't a whole lot that they could do as far as going down the field, so they tried to attack short in the short field, and Darius Slay was not having it. What we are having, another beautiful transition. Derek Fournier, did I say that correctly?
You did.
All right, I'm terrible when it comes to saying people's names, so I'm glad I got that right. He has a podcast called WhatTheBucs. Or is it WhatTheBuc? Sorry.
WhatTheBuc, yeah, singular.
Alrighty, and he has a beautiful website, whatthebuc.net. Well, welcome to the show, Derek.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Derek, if we can start with this Bucs team, it's a team that most Lions fans aren't going to be familiar with this season. We saw the Lovie Smith hire and all that. There was with the NFC South. There was expectations for each of these teams, and we know where each of them is at right now. Can you kind of take us through this season for Tampa Bay? How did this team get to where they're at, and how low they are at this point in the season?
Well, I mean, you started the conversation well. There's a lot of expectations with Lovie coming back to Tampa. Lovie coached with us before during our sort of heyday. And so the fans here and a lot of the sort of more astute football fans were particularly excited because he assembled a pretty good staff. And with Jason Light coming in, they seemed to make some good moves, or what looked on paper to be good moves in free agency to shore up some holes and go in a direction that we thought maybe the offense would look a little different down here. We felt like the defense would be fine. It would take some time for these guys to understand it. People always, they sort of cast a wide net on this and call it the Tampa 2 that Lovey runs, which is an incredibly gross misnomer and underestimation of what it is. Tampa 2 is just a coverage. But if you know the defense, you know it takes time for you to get that sort of confidence and realize that you've got to mind your gap, your responsibility. Everyone's got to work as a team. So we knew it would be tough at the beginning, but we figured the offense with Jeff Teffer coming in would be something we'd never seen before, the speed and space kind of thing, Chip Kelly-esque, if you will. Bringing Josh McCown down after having a decent season up there with Chicago or a decent 5-game run anyway. And having what we're called the Duncaneers down here with Evans and Jackson and then ASJ, we thought we had a lot of the right artillery. But what we discovered after some research, and by research I mean getting our teeth kicked in, was that our offensive line is absolutely abysmal, that the 2 pickups we made on the offensive line that were supposed to make us better, EDS and Anthony Collins, are absolutely terrible. And the zone scheme that was implemented here has never gotten through to these guys. So we've been left with a team that can neither protect any passer, it's irrespective of whether it's Josh McCown or Mike Glennon or Mike Kafka, or if we brought Dan Orlovsky back off of your roster, it wouldn't matter. They'd all get killed. And really, it wouldn't matter who's running the ball. If we run zone, we can't run the ball effectively.
It is, and you mentioned the running game there. Is the zone scheme the reason that, Doug Martin has kind of disappeared, and I don't know if Bobby Rainey's the guy or what exactly the carousel is in Tampa Bay at the moment, but where does the rushing attack stand? Is Doug Martin still supposed to be the guy moving forward for Tampa Bay?
Well, I think right now they're trying to showcase Doug. I happen to like Doug. I think that Doug's got plenty of fuel left in the tank. He had a couple of injuries that set him back. If you watch these guys in training camp, whether it was Doug or Bobby Rainey or Mike James out of the University of Miami, these guys are all sort of similar backs. They have little strengths that are different, right? Bobby Rainey's a quick burst guy. He's going to be able to get shifty, but they're all small and coming through the line of scrimmage, and they all run pretty hard. The thing is, the only game that we really had any significant positive rushing yards was the one game where we ran a predominantly power man blocking scheme. Now, I wish I could tell you why for one game we went to power man blocking, and I wish more I could tell you why we never went back to it, right? Because Bobby Rainey had like 96 yards in the first half, and then we went away from it in the second half and, of course, lost. And it's like we lost the pages of the playbook. So I honestly think maybe Doug Martin's time here is done. I don't necessarily think that's a great move, but fortunately we've got a significant amount of mediocrity behind him that apparently is good enough. And we got Charles Sims that we drafted, and the team really likes him. So we're seeing a lot of him, but right now he's making rookie mistakes and rushing things.
Well, and staying in the backfield, there was a lot of people talked about the Lovie Smith bringing in McCown, somebody he was at least familiar with. Do you think that McCown's going to be back as the number 1, or should Glennon be the top dog coming into next year, or are they going to take that top pick that they're very likely to have and pick up one of those coveted 2 quarterbacks at the top?
Well, I tell you, I think you could have some really angry fans in Tampa because right now you've got the normal, groundswell of, tank for insert name here, and people, telling you to lose games, which I just turns my stomach as a fan and as a, coach and all that sort of crap. But and I don't believe that there's a franchise quarterback aisle at your local grocery store. You just go there and pick them up because the numbers tell me that's not true. So it doesn't matter how good they look in college; they could come out and just be a big pile of crap when they take a snap under center for an NFL team. But if they end up with a 1 or 2, I think it's going to be really hard for the ownership to not pick one of the top 2 quarterbacks. Even though I know that guards are a 70 to 80% success rate inside the top 5 picks, and doesn't matter what quarterback you have if you can't protect him, it's immaterial. To speak about Glennon, Mike's a good kid. He's playing, I think, as well as he's going to play. I think if he went to a team that was more of a traditional pocket passing team, I think and everyone jokes down here that we send everyone to the Patriots because that's what we seem to do. I think if he sat behind a guy like Brady, one of these teams that did not require their quarterbacks to run for their lives on every play, he could do well. He's got a decent arm. He has some shortcomings. He had his shot here when McCown was hurt, and he started to backtrack. And when that happened, It was a matter of Lovey trying to get some wins and get things turned around here. I think Josh will be back next year. He's a much better quarterback than people outside of the market see, and I think he's a much better quarterback than he showed on tape because he is under a tremendous amount of fire.
And you touched on this just a minute ago with some saying that the team should tank or what have you. But from what you've seen, do the Bucs look like a team that is still playing to win, or does it seem like a team that's lost its will to win or what have you? Do they seem like a hungry football team at this point?
I think there are pockets of hungry. It's interesting because when Tony Dungy came here and really sort of rebuilt this franchise, one of the speeches he gave in the locker room, and I'll paraphrase because I don't have the direct quote, but he made a comment essentially, many of you are not the right men to be in this locker room, and I will replace you eventually.
Ooh.
Right?
Wow, that is...
There was no mask. I mean, Tony's a very soft-spoken, quiet guy. Everyone knows who
Tony Dungy said that?
Calm and quiet demeanor. Some of you guys aren't the right guys, and I'll replace you eventually. And Lovie Smith had the same mentality, and he said it in so many ways. But you can only replace so many people. I mean, hell, the roster we got now is nowhere near the roster we started with. So the guys are out there playing. We got guys, Jacques Smith, who I think has gotten, I think he came in week 6. Has a very small number of snaps. He's got 4 sacks. No one knows where the heck this guy came from, but he's playing hard. The defense is starting to put it together. And as we talk about this matchup this week, well, I know that a lot of Lions fans will look past us, and given the way you guys have handled yourself this season, I can understand why. But the defense is starting to come together, even with the guys with their names written in marker on the back of the jerseys. But the offense is where we're really, really struggling right now.
Yeah, I've seen in doing some research about this game, is it Danny? Man, why do I set myself up like this? Danny Lazzada. Yeah, he had a very nice game filling in for Levant there with 14 tackles or so. And they have I'm a former Spartan, Michigan State, and see you had William Golston on the roster, so I always appreciate that. Although I don't know how well he'll do for you, but we're talking about the defense, and I assume that's probably the side that you feel most confident about. And the offense has been a little scary for you guys this year. Heading into this Detroit matchup, what scares you most about Detroit?
Ziggy Ansah.
I love it. Yeah, we have a thing. We have a. We started right after he got drafted. We started doing this podcast, and I was very effusive in my praise, we'll say. So now anytime Ziggy Ansah is brought up, the listeners are supposed to take a shot.
I have reports on my podcast too, so I understand it. If he was on my team, we'd be drinking a lot. But your defensive stats, you got a couple of guys that pop out. DeAndre Levy as well. And of course the guys that we already know, right? And Ndamukong Suh. It's not like he stopped playing football, right? So you guys have a formidable defense. You were talking about one of your defensive backs earlier, Darius Slay, who I don't know a lot about, but he grades out very well. The defense scares me because, well, for various reasons, not the least of which being the fact that we can't block anybody. And so playing against a team who can legitimately get pressure on a team who can block, that scares me to death for the life of our quarterbacks, because we really only have 2 actions. We're going to have a direct snap, and it's going to get ugly.
Assuming the quarterback is alive and well as the game wears on, yes, where do you see Tampa Bay's biggest advantage being in this game?
It's interesting. We've got a first-year play caller because of Jeff Tedford taking his medical leave because of his heart condition, and that's really hurt us a lot. Marcus Arroyo was supposed to be the quarterback's coach. Seems like a good enough guy, but he's really been out over his skis with game plans. And he's got this sort of good Play-Doh out here. Mike Evans has had a great season despite the ineptitude of the rest of the offense. Vincent Jackson still plays really, really solid football. And Josh McCown, if you give him enough time, can really hurt you. So I think that the height helps us in the same way that Calvin Johnson helps you guys on the other side. They're not Calvin Johnsons, and I'm not trying to make that comparison. He's one of a kind in my opinion. But they have similar mismatch capabilities in that they can bail out a quarterback. If he can get the ball up to them, they can win those 50-50 balls. And that's something the Bucs have to do. They have to negate your pass rush. We have gotten better at the screen game. So I think if we can bait you into coming after Josh and dump behind you, get our guys in space, maybe we can do something there. But that's really, on the offensive side, that's, I think, our only prayer.
Well, and kind of keeping with that theme of what it's going to take, the next question is, Tampa Bay will win if
our defense scores.
Okay.
I say that, and it may sound like I'm trying to make fun of our team, because I love our team, and I always think that we can win. And I think that ways this team, the parity is so profound If you really watch the games, it would scare you. But our defense has gotten much, much better over the last 3 weeks at creating the turnovers. We were creating deflections and doing all those things, but the blocks hadn't come together until about the last 3 weeks. And now we're getting the interceptions and the turnovers. And last week, Jonathan Banks intercepts, I think, the first pass of the game, gets to the 5-yard line, and we're so inept we can't score anything but a field goal from the 5 with 2 guys that are 6'6" or better, 3 guys who are 6'6" or better in the red zone. So, and then we end up losing by a point, right? I mean, you can't leave those points on the field. You just can't. So, Mason Foster, one of the things he's been notorious for, if he makes a pick, he's getting it in the end zone somehow. I don't know why. It's a UW thing, I guess. He's going to get it in the end zone. And I think the defense is going to start taking on the same attitude that they had back in the old glory days for us, which was the defense felt like they had to score at least once a game to get us over the hump.
You can find him on Twitter at WhatTheBuc and at WhatTheBuc.net. His name is Derek Fournier, and we appreciate so much you taking a few minutes to talk Lions Bucs with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a great show.
All right.
Thank you, Derek.
Again, that was Derek Fournier at WhatTheBuc and WhatTheBuc.net. We'll get to our breakdown of the Bucs game in just a minute or two, Brandon. First, I wanted to run through a couple of the news and notes. Well, one of these names, whatever. News and notes. Nick Fairley, Larry Warford, Riley Reif, and Reggie Bush obviously didn't play on Thanksgiving Day. Warford and Reif still they're on the recovery trail, but we've heard Fairley might possibly be done for the year. Caldwell said it's possible, but there's nothing definitive on anyone here. It's just it's frustrating to not have definitive answers on these guys and know when they'll be back. With Reggie Bush saying at this point, I don't even know if he's a real human being anymore. But Fairley's someone you really want to see back in the fold, and then the offensive linemen, we know where the offensive line stands without them. So we don't have definitive answers for anyone, unfortunately.
No, but I do want to share this lovely note that I see here on the rundown. I believe it is Buck Fush.
Yeah. I think I didn't want to use foul language on the show, so we put, do we care to update anything on Reggie Bush? And in my response, all I put was Buck Fush, so everyone can figure out what I'm going for with that.
Yeah. That way, I don't think we earned an explicit tag for that one. It does here, yeah. The Warford. He might be back this week. We'll see what happens. That would be nice. Swanson has been playing all right. He hasn't been stellar by any means. He does get beaten, obviously, at times. There was the Willie Young just tore him apart. Luckily, he also grabbed Matthew Stafford's head while tearing apart the quarterback, so completely negated the play, completely negated the sack. And I assume it's still part of Swanson's grade. He had the worst grade along the offensive line at negative 2.6. But everybody else did pretty well. Like we said, Lucas kind of acquitted himself decently. But, yeah, I think if you can get Riley Reif back there, that's a huge difference, especially because they're pushing for the playoffs. Right now, Detroit's in 6th place. Due to a tie-breaking loss to Seattle and a tie-break win over Dallas, conference records, common opponents, all that good stuff. To going over to all the competition, Seattle beat San Francisco quite convincingly. Actually, do you know the number 1 defense is now?
No.
It's Seattle. It's not Detroit anymore. Detroit still has the lead in points, I think by over a solid point. But Seattle is allowed, and don't quote me, but it's got to be very close, 286 yards of offense in the last 2 games.
With the upcoming games against Tampa and Minnesota, Detroit's going to have every opportunity to reclaim their throne, if you will.
Yeah, but you also have Seattle, I think, playing both those teams again. So they're going to have a chance to keep those. There's nothing about San Francisco offensive-wise that I think is enticing. And, yeah, Drew Stanton, besides those 2 first throws against Detroit, there hasn't been a whole lot going on. Arizona lost to Atlanta in Atlanta. They never really threatened in that game. Like we said, San Francisco lost. Dallas lost to Philly quite convincingly. I think it was 33-10 on Thanksgiving. And then Green Bay with the huge win over New England. Does Detroit still have a chance of even touching Green Bay before the season's over?
Personally, I don't think so, because I don't think there's any way they go into Green Bay and win Week 17. Now, if Green Bay had lost to New England here and made the records identical, and maybe there's a chance because Detroit, I think, has easier matchups down the stretch. But a game back and then I'm assuming a loss at Green Bay, they could very well win that game. But assuming they lose, which I expect, I just don't see any way that they make up the ground on a really hot Green Bay team that's beating great competition. sure, there's still a chance, but I don't see it happening for Detroit.
Yeah, that's going to be one of those. They have to absolutely dominate the line of scrimmage. I don't know if you watched that game. I'm sure you did.
I watch every game.
Oh yeah, of course. I know you. You're Ron Jaworski on steroids on cocaine. But
I watched 72 hours of film this week. Yeah, I did.
Wow, that's spot on. But the one thing they were doing is New England wasn't even rushing him. They were just kind of waiting around to see where he's going to go because they're so scared of him. That is one. Scared of his running. That is one advantage Detroit has on them, is that they'll attack him and they will try to put him on the ground. And granted, that opens up guys like Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb taking short passes, and we saw what Jordy Nelson did right before halftime, running away from Darrelle Revis, which Golden Tate couldn't even do the week before. So, yeah, we'll probably leave that, let that go for a few weeks to keep the Lions fans upbeat. We don't need to talk about that now. One more note before we move on to the Bucs preview is the Vikings game next weekend has been flexed to 425. Are you surprised by this? I understand Detroit, but why would anybody want to watch them play Minnesota?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the thinking is here. It's not like it was flexed into prime time or anything. They're not putting it on Sunday Night Football. It's a 4:25 start. I'm not sure of the reasoning behind it, but it's still in the hodgepodge of early games. So I'm not putting too much stock into moving to 4:25.
Well, I thought it was. I didn't even know they flexed teams to 425.
I've never heard of flexing from 1 to 4. Yeah, that was odd.
Yeah, that's got to be a new. Well, and maybe part of it is because we're watching Lions time so closely as opposed to every other one. There hasn't been a lot of opportunity over the last 2 years late in the season to flex Detroit very far. But with that, we turn to the Bucs again. We thank Derek Fournier at WhatTheBuc, WhatTheBuc.net. That was some good insight. I got to say, I learned some things there aside from my obvious copious amounts of research. There's more to this team that meets their eye. There's more than their 2-10 record. I know that they don't look like much, especially when you're talking about guys like Josh McCown or Mike Lennon, quarterbacking this team. Lovie Smith doesn't exactly strike fear into this team or strike fear into anybody. But Nick, what about this team scares you?
Well, and you mentioned that it just 7 of their losses have been by single digits. I mean, this is a team that's been in football games. Their record is terrible, but they have They have 2 overtime losses. They do have a win over Pittsburgh. Their other win was against Washington, which isn't as impressive. But they've been in a lot of close football games. So this isn't a team other than there was that one national game against Atlanta. I think it was on Thursday night early in the season where they just got massacred. It was like 56-10, 14, something. Yeah, that was terrible. But they've been in a lot of close games. So this team is. I don't think they're as bad as their record would suggest. But I don't think there's any one individual aspect of their team. I can't point to one player that really scares me. I know the guy you're going to get to is a good example of that, and he's had his comparisons to Ndamukong Suh. I'll let you make them. But offensively, I like
I think
their.
You just did.
I'll let you break it down. I'm saying, but offensively, I like some of their playmakers. I like Mike Evans and Vincent Jackson, but I don't think they scare me enough to say that they're a real threat to do things in this game particularly. I put nothing as what scares you, and I don't mean that to sound cocky for a Lions perspective, but I don't think they have standout players offensively that are going to do damage to Detroit, and defensively, the one guy is the one you're going to name.
Are you the guy that comments on my articles every week, depending on if win or loss, Super Bowl bound, and or they're not even going to make the playoffs, player everybody?
I have stood firm at 10-6 all season, Brandon, through the highs and the lows. This is a 10-6 football team. I remain firm on 10-6.
Well, just because you seem pretty confident, there is one thing that scares me very much about this Tampa Bay team. That is, as you alluded to, Gerald McCoy. He actually has the exact same Pro Football Focus grade as Ndamukong Suh, which is kind of wild and very, very difficult to actually happen this late in the season. It's 27.9, which puts them both number 2 when it comes to defensive tackles and nose tackles. Do you want to know who number 1 is? Because this is going to drive you nuts.
Oh, please.
It looks like actually the grades have been updated. Now, Gerald McCoy is up by a full point on Ndamukong Suh. Suh, we didn't talk about it too much. He didn't have much of a game last week, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with the Bears' game plan. But Aaron Donald is the highest graded defensive tackle in the league.
Yeah, I'll bet he is.
But the difference between McCoy and Sue is, well, Sue is he's more balanced. I know you love that balance.
Yeah.
He's more balanced. He can hurt you against the run. He can rush the passer. Joe McCoy is almost strictly all about that pass. Yeah, I love that joke. But anyways, he really earns his bread by being a pass rusher. He has 8.5 quarterback sacks this year, 9 quarterback hits, and 23 quarterback hurries to go with that. By comparison, Sue does have 4 sacks, and he actually has more quarterback hurries than 29. But Gerald McCoy gets the quarterbacks, he gets them down on the ground. I know that the offense was able to get through with just the 2 sacks, or basically 1 when you take away the slide. I'm still concerned about him busting through the middle, especially with Dominic Raiola, the guy that's in between him and Stafford.
Yeah, Gerald McCoy's a beast. I mean, it is what it is, and he's going to get paid accordingly. The biggest Detroit advantage, we talked on the biggest Tampa advantage with Derek. Let's give our advantages for Detroit. You have Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate, and Tate's been one of the best receivers in the league all season, and Calvin Johnson, we saw this past week, has regained his form, and we know what Calvin is. Who's going to stop these two for Tampa Bay? Who's going to try and slow them down? I'm not impressed with Tampa Bay's secondary, individually or as a group. The numbers, just the broad number, is they're 22nd in the league in allowing 245 passing yards a game. Lower than they are. They're more at the bottom than they are in the middle of the pack. I don't like Tampa's secondary, especially without Darrelle Revis in it anymore. There isn't a name there that jumps at me, and there isn't anyone I say that can, or even with the double team, if they double Calvin, who's going to single cover Golden Tate? It's a lose-lose, I think, for Tampa Bay in that aspect.
Well, Jonathan Banks has been doing a little bit better. People might remember him.
Yeah.
He was a draft target, at least for Detroit, somewhat. But yeah, their secondary isn't great. They did trade away Mark Barron as well. So they've kind of given up on a lot of those things. For me, Detroit's biggest advantage is the quarterback position. Detroit has 1. Tampa Bay supposedly has 2. You can do the math there. They don't have any. Josh McCown, he's a career backup for a reason. I don't know why Lovie Smith thought, hey, I'm going to build my team around this 35-year-old journeyman. That happened, I think, exactly once and worked well. You don't find Kurt Warners. You definitely don't find them in Chicago. I don't trust them to really have a good day, especially with the defensive line that we all usually, if one of us talks about, is the advantage. So for me, I think that the only way, or I think the Lions will win this game if they score 2 touchdowns and have 2 or fewer turnovers, just because I don't see how Josh McCown or Mike Glennon are going to lead too many scoring drives.
Yeah, a similar vein. I don't see them scoring a lot either. I think if Detroit scores more than 14 points, they're going to take this one down. And obviously, we saw against Arizona and New England where points have been a struggle for Detroit in the past. I don't think they will be on this day, but I don't see Tampa Bay being able to move the ball effectively for one reason that Derek highlighted. Especially their offensive line isn't good. They're not going to get a push. They're not going to establish the ground game. And when Tampa Bay relies solely on the pass with that journeyman quarterback, as you mentioned, it hasn't worked a lot for them this season. And if Detroit is able to put points on the board, this game could get out of hand in a hurry. I think it will. We both do, but I have Detroit winning this one 35-13. I think this is going to be their biggest win of the season. I've had it circled for a while as a game that Detroit should win. This is a game you expect them to win, even if it is on the road. Detroit should take care of business against Tampa Bay. It's a game that a playoff team takes care of in a big way, and this shouldn't be close. If it is and they find a way to win, so be it. And any win is a win. But I think this is one where Detroit gets a real blowout victory.
Yeah, I also think the offense will keep rolling. There was we didn't even bring up last year's contest when we had Derek on, and that's what killed Detroit last year: turnovers, blown coverages, all that kind of stuff. That they were in their free fall. It was obvious that team was done. And giving up on Schwartz and all that good stuff or bad stuff or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't think that they can replicate that effort. I don't know why they were able to last year. But for this one, I'm going to follow your suit. I had the offense putting up 30 points again. I have this one going 31-10, which obviously means the Bucs are going to win by 2. There's no way we should be this confident.
Well, hey, in our defense, looking at our bold predictions here, we both picked the Lions last week, and it worked out for us in a big way. Where we currently stand, we both or I went 1-1 this past week. I picked the Lions, and I had 3 passing touchdowns for Stafford. He only had 2. He did have 390 yards, so close but no cigar. You moved to 13-9 on the season. You picked the Lions, and you had 100 with a touchdown for Calvin Johnson. So kudos.
Yep.
Bold predictions for this week as I continue my stance of needing to get off the schneid here with my bold predictions. I got Tampa going under 225 yards passing. It's something they have not done a lot this season, staying under that number. It's a really low number, and they're going to have to pass early and often, I think, in this game because I don't see a ground game developing for them, and I see them down by a lot of points. So even with having to throw a ton, I just don't like their chances doing it. I see their offense being really stagnant in this game, and maybe I'm overselling Detroit way too much, but I believe in them in this contest. Give me Tampa Bay going under 225 through the air.
Well, and I want to obviously keep winning. It's important that I always win when it comes to anything competition-wise with you, as we talked about with Reggie Bell. Reggie Bell. Well, you might as well be Reggie Bell.
Please continue.
I forgot his name. But the point is that I'm going to go Tampa Bay is going to throw for under 300 yards. That way, I'm pretty much assured that I'm going to keep a point above you. No, I'm just kidding. No, what I'm going to do is I think the Lions are going to force at least 3 turnovers. I think that, as Derek talked about, the offensive line is atrocious for Tampa Bay. That's going to make life tough. I don't know if we could hammer away on Tampa Bay's quarterbacks anymore. They don't do too bad turning the ball over. I think they will today, though, or not today, but this coming Sunday. I mean,
maybe our listeners are listening as a pregame treat, Brandon. Maybe you're correct in that statement.
That could be, but neither of Tampa Bay's quarterbacks have. One is 59.2%, that's McCown, and one's completing pass, or the other, Glennon, is 57.6. Glennon actually has a higher rating at 83.3. McCown 75.5, and they have 15 interceptions between them. I think that number is going to take a jump. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them if McCown got the hook this week, because I think that they're going to throw quite a few picks. I say 3 turnovers coming because of the chaotic defense, the messing with McCown's head. He doesn't have what it takes to go up against Terrell Austin.
I'm going to bring up our bet because I suppose I have to at the end of each show. The Reggie Bell now I'm doing it. Reggie Bush versus Joik Bell bet that we had going. I don't have the raw numbers for you because I couldn't even bring myself to look them up this week. Joik has an insurmountable lead at this point. Reggie Bush, we don't know if he's even going to be on the field. He's kind of a ghost at this point. So if and when Reggie Bush does return to the field, I will update these numbers accordingly, and maybe it becomes a closer race than either of us expect it will at this point. I'm fully prepared to change my Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Friendster, MySpace avatars at the end of the season. That's where it stands as of now. Joik Bell with a huge lead in our bet.
Yeah, I want to say he put up 23 or 24 points in my league. He had 108 to like 68, I think, before that. So we're getting real close to double territory. I think that actually would be a double up scenario if he did have. Well, no, he did 28 for that. But anyways, so if you want to talk more about Reggie Bell or Joik Bush, you can find us on social media. Or Buck Foosh, any of them. You can find us on social media. That's Lions Central Radio on Facebook. You can find the show on Twitter at Lions Central PFC. You can find me personally on Twitter at Brandon Alisoglu. It's ALISOGLU. And you can find Nick Kostora, again, on Twitter for whatever reason, KOSTORA. And I do want to say we'll keep you updated with the new site we're going to have launching. It'll have plenty of things to keep the Lions fan and you busy, so be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, definitely. We are still a proud partner of the Pro Football Central podcast community, just building a new site to bring you more Lions coverage. As always, we'll update it on Facebook, Twitter, what have you throughout the week. Please do interact with us on those social media platforms, guys. We always appreciate it. We love talking to you. Looking for a good game against Tampa Bay this week, and then we'll move on next week to bigger and better things, hopefully. Until then, for Brandon Alisoglu, I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.